So I made a prediction all the way back in October that liberal celebrities and just general people who'd either stayed silent about what's happening to Palestine, or they had backed the Israeli side, or they tried to like both sides things in favor of Israel, they were going to act like they basically didn't do this and they weren't like horrifically racist in doing this. The media was also going to help them rehabilitate themselves, acting like they weren't like super inflammatory, they weren't super racist, they were simply like speaking up for like Jewish people in general, how lovely. And someone who has had a previous racist controversy in the past, Amy Schumer, was probably one of the worst examples of a celebrity, apart from maybe a few others, who completely lost their mind and have basically backed everything Israel have done, but before, at the end of like 2023, kind of backing away a tiny bit when realizing, I guess, the brutality and the scale of what Israel was doing. But don't worry, it's not like they've apologized, not like they backed down. And it appears in the Hollywood bubble, you can be as pro-Israeli as you want, as racist as you want, as long as that serves Israeli propaganda. And as we saw with various different actors and actresses, if you actually speak up in favor of Palestine, there are consequences for that. Now, Amy Schumer has come back into, I guess, the limelight with this Variety piece. Amy Schumer for Variety's Power of Women, with this very nice like cover photograph. And don't worry, there's an entire profile about her, a very, very glowing profile, which also takes some comments from Jennifer Lawrence as well about how great Amy Schumer is. And yes, the irony I don't think is lost on anyone in that Jennifer Lawrence starred in the Hunger Games, and in real life it's like she's friends with someone who's supporting the actions of President Snow in the Hunger Games. And it's the same with Mark Hamill, also supports Israel. And I always talk about how conservatives are like very media illiterate. Can you imagine like starring in Star Wars and starring in the Hunger Games about fights against fascism and authoritarian governments, and then in real life either staying silent or actually backing that fascism when it happens in real life? Better yet, you could be Neil Druckmann, who writes and directs a whole video game actually inspired by Israel and Palestine, about how revenge and cycles of revenge can eventually lead to absolutely terrible things committed by one side, and in the case of The Last of Us, the side that take inspiration from the IDF. And when in real life, when this thing happens, you let your need for revenge consume you and actually support the side you were criticizing in the game you wrote and directed. I don't know someone who's more familiar with like media terms and maybe like books and stuff. Is there actually a term for this? It's like if George Lucas came out in support of like American imperialism when like both his trilogies were criticizing US imperialism. Like, it's very, very bizarre. But anyway, I wanted to look at what Amy Schumer said to remind people what she said. Remind people she was very vocal and very racist. And then just contrast it with the profile written by Variety to prove to people, if you support Israel, you can say anything and there will be no consequences ever. Especially if you hide behind liberal identity politics, as Amy Schumer does. And actually, in the case of general society, you can actually be very anti-Semitic like Elon Musk. But if you're pro-Israeli, the head of an organization designed to combat anti-Jewish discrimination will actually endorse you, right? Because they don't actually care about discrimination, they care only about the interests of Israel in this case. So I'm going to play you a little montage of all the stuff Amy Schumer posted on social media, and I'm just going to like specifically talk about the points I think are worth elaborating on a bit more to paint this picture. Stuff I feel needs elaborating on more. So this was probably the most famous picture, where she has a bunch of mainly white people who are like pro-Palestinian protesters, and apparently they're just like agreeing with like awful violence. But in the framing, she frames it as Gazans versus Jewish, right? So obviously there's no distinction between any type of Gazan. This Gazan in this placard this person's holding could be a Palestinian Christian, could just be any Palestinian who's not associated with organizations like Hamas, but she posted that because she doesn't see them as human. They're all guilty. They're all the same. It's the exact type of mindset the Israeli government has to the whole conflict. So Asia Jackson tweeted back in October, "It's so crazy to me how Bella and Gigi had to tiptoe around their statements, and then Amy Schumer posts that racist meme I showed you earlier and will still have a career." And she's completely right as well, because there's now this Puff Piece Variety article. But don't worry, Amy Schumer dives into this person's DMs and says, "Did something I post about my people being massacred upset you?" Asia replying, "The Islamophobia and generalizations of Gazan people did. Really sorry about that." And then Asia Jackson actually posted the rest of the conversation on her own Instagram story, telling her she's not educated about the history of the Jewish people and the conflict, saying, "I'd like to express that I think you're anti-Semitic," and just like an absolutely unhinged message to this person. And then Asia replying, "Very curious to hear you know that I'm not educated about the history of the conflict. How do you know that? You've literally just followed me. You don't know who I am. How is it anti-Semitic to call you out for all the racist things you've said since 2015? But it just shows you how absolutely unhinged Amy Schumer is. Obviously, I remember this being shown around. Do you remember when the Israelis bombed that hospital for the first time and they started saying it was actually a Palestinian insurgent group? And when it came out later, it's pretty clearly it wasn't. Like, we all knew it wasn't straight away. And then they've proceeded to destroy every single hospital in Gaza itself. So I don't know why they even lied about this to start with. But people like Amy Schumer, and I remember David Pacman as well, basically saying it's the anti-Semitic Twitter lefties who just can't accept that anyone in Gaza would do something bad, they have to blame Israel. And Amy Schumer took this chance as well. Again, no apology for ever doing this. Saying it was the Palestinians, saying that the Western outlets push this propaganda, saying to fire the editors at the BBC News, the New York Times, and Sky News and CNN because they stoke anti-Jewish hatred worldwide, hold media prejudice accountable. So because some outlets were initially doubting the Israeli claim it was Palestinian, apparently they're anti-Semitic. But then it turns out, oh no, they were actually right. And then at the end of the day, even if it was Palestinians who accidentally did this, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because Israel say they're going to do it, and then they proceeded to do it to every single hospital. Probably the worst thing, she posted a video of Martin Luther King talking about discrimination against Jews. And Martin Luther King's own daughter said, "My father was against anti-Semitism, as am I. He also believed militarism, along with racism and poverty, to be among the interconnected triple evils. I'm certain he would call for Israel's bombing of Palestinians to cease and for the hostages to be released." He also posted something about Arab funding of Ivy League universities. I don't know what Arab funding means. Can you please, I would really like some clarification. He posted something that says, "Cornell received the single largest recipient of Arab funding with over 1.5 billion gifted between 127 gifts or contracts. Students at American universities are currently exhibiting overwhelming support for Hamas and condemnation of the state of Israel," right? So you have to have like a completely racist worldview to think any of this is true in the first place, in terms of it's this funding that makes the students oppose Israel, and also framing it this way again. But yeah, Arab funding, what does that mean? It's so vague. How many Arabs are in the world? How many different Arab countries are there in the world? Like majority Arab. And also a lot of them don't really get on that well either. So this could be a random, very pro-American and perhaps even pro-Israeli Arab from Morocco who funded some of this stuff. And it could also be like a very, very conservative, anti-Israel, maybe even slightly anti-American, someone from, I don't know, Qatar or Saudi Arabia, right? Also could be like a secular Arab American or something. I think I've highlighted most of the unhinged shit she was posting. She kind of like stopped a bit towards the end of the year. But the problem is Instagram used to show you what people were liking. Like you'd have a section on the notifications tab where you could see what your friends were liking. Obviously that's been long gone. So to actually see the unhinged shit these people actually like on Instagram, you have to actually follow them and see the same stuff they're liking. So trust me, all these people like her were liking absolutely insane racist stuff, as well as posting it to their main page. You can be really, really racist in Hollywood, and you can obviously support a terrible country right now, and there's just no issues. Because Hollywood in a lot of areas is basically an arm of US imperialism anyway, very connected with the US establishment, and obviously because Hollywood loves that access to the US military. Of course, it's massively pro-Israel as well. And that's why you get loads of Israeli propaganda films and basically no mainstream Palestinian films. Despite there being a lot of Palestinian films or films about Palestine out there, you'll rarely see them on the mass market because Hollywood will never fund them. So now let's get into the Variety article. So on Twitter, they were just posting, and I probably showed you this already, just all these different people. And Amy Schumer was one of them for Variety's Power of Women lineup launches this week. And I just want to read the article. I'm probably going to cut down my reading of it, but we'll stop at the bits that are insane and just talk about like the general tone of it as well. So Rebecca Rubin, Amy Schumer can't escape backlash. She's okay with that. So Amy Schumer was in the zone. This was in March when she was filming on the street in Brooklyn for her upcoming movie Kinda Pregnant, a comedy about a woman who pretends to be knocked up for attention. In one take, Schumer emerged from a subway station while answering a phone call and was interrupted by a stranger shouting at her, "Fuck you, Amy Schumer, you're a Zionist." Disruptions of the four-letter variety aren't unusual in New York, though they are usually less pointed. Schumer didn't break character, refusing to stop working. As the woman carried on, the actress finished the scene finally, packed up her stuff, and went home to her husband and their 4-year-old son. "I didn't even raise my heart rate," Schumer says, over brunch at a cozy Brooklyn Heights tavern a couple days later. "I didn't cry. Nothing." So yeah, we're already getting the tone that Amy Schumer is very, very brave after posting very pro-Israeli statements, extremely racist anti-Palestinian ones as well, and someone in New York called her out her face. But we're meant to think from the tone of this article, this is actually like a good thing, right? She took it in her stride. Not that most people would say, if you say terrible stuff like that, at the very least, people are going to be outraged and will probably tell you in public. She's talking about what she's been saying recently. The focus is so razor sharp on Jewish people, but not on Hamas. Don't know what world she lives in. It's very strange, so I'd recommend people read a book. Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth by Noah Tishby, or anything. Jewish people wrote everything down. I wouldn't recommend that book, and I don't know anything about this author or this book, but I can probably tell you if Amy Schumer's recommending it, it's probably not a very good history to read about Israel. But yeah, I don't know what this world is where people are focusing on Jewish people, and I love how she keeps conflating Israeli and Jewish all the time, when our whole media has been screaming hysterically about Hamas for like, I don't know, nearly 2 decades, as Israel used that excuse to justify every crime under the sun, and our Western media is completely complicit. So it goes on to say, none of this has stopped Schumer from getting jobs. That's very nice to hear. She was prolific during the pandemic, creating 2 shows and churning out new episodes of her comedy show. And she's also got 2 Netflix movies in the can. And unsurprisingly, Jerry Seinfeld's Unfrosted and Kinda Pregnant. Jerry Seinfeld, also a massive supporter of Israel. He's even gone over there recently. So talking more about Israel, Schumer has been scrutinized for her social media posts, which some feel conflate Palestinians with Hamas. Some feel. Here's a picture of her doing that. It's not just feeling, she did that. She was criticized for sharing a video of Martin Luther King condemning anti-Semitism and saying that Israel has the right to exist. Then Bernice King, the activist's daughter, responded to Schumer, correcting her. It's gotten to this place, Schumer says, where you can't speak up for other Jews without people feeling like it's a slight to the conditions in Gaza. Again, I don't know what she's talking about here. In fact, she wants people to know that her public activism doesn't mean she supports the Israeli government. I don't agree with anything that Netanyahu is doing, and neither do the Israelis I know. Yes, they do. That's just a lie. Of course, what's going on in Gaza is sickening, horrifying, and unthinkable, and I don't think it's okay to hate anyone because they were born Jewish. So a bit of a pivot in terms of what she was saying in October and November. She's going on like this because moments earlier, a 20-something woman approached the table and addressed her. "Thank you for everything you're doing for Israel. I follow you on social media. I used to live there, and thank you. We support you." Schumer saying that moment you just saw maybe 10 times a day. That happens to me. So a lot of the cop-out you're going to continually see is that a lot of these people don't support Netanyahu or don't support what the Netanyahu government is doing. And that's just like a flat out lie. We've seen from polling data, and I need to read new polls in it, but I quoted this back in February. A poll showed that 95% of Jewish people in Israel supported what was going on. It's hard to believe that the remaining 5% who oppose it are friends of Amy Schumer, considering what she's posting, right? And we've seen like the types of people who are the 5%, the young people who refuse to go in the draft and stuff. To me, that doesn't seem like the type of friends Amy Schumer would have. What she probably means is she has friends who hate Netanyahu. But even the leader of the opposition, who obviously hates Netanyahu, has been saying like very similar stuff about Gaza as well, right? And that's something that most of Israeli society agree on. But we can all see what's happening in real time. Netanyahu is going to be like this sacrifice all these countries are going to make, saying that he went too far. It's all Netanyahu's fault. It's not the Israeli government as a whole. It's not the Israeli nation state as a whole that was complicit in this. It was this one madman who did this. One madman. And because he was unpopular in Israel before, and because he's still unpopular, not for what he's doing to Gaza, by the way, he's unpopular for a whole host of other things, then they're all going to deflect and say, well, I never supported Netanyahu. But yes, Amy Schumer, you did support Netanyahu, even if you didn't name him, because you supported what Israel were doing under his government of extremists, right? So you did support him. Even if you say now you didn't like him, or maybe you don't personally like him, it doesn't really matter, does it? If you support everything he was doing during this time period. But again, keep this in mind. As I said before, liberals are going to pretend they were on the right side of history, and what they're going to do to achieve this is pretend they didn't support anything because they didn't like Netanyahu. And again, we've seen from various polling data, the overwhelming majority, and in some polls nearly like the whole entirety of the Jewish population of Israel have supported what's going on at least until the end of January. But then it moves on to like Jennifer Lawrence. So Jennifer Lawrence, one of Schumer's BFFs, tells me that it's part of being a woman in Hollywood at this point. The expectation for scrutiny is so embedded in my DNA, I wouldn't know how to operate differently. But she thinks Schumer's better equipped than most to handle it. Amy's choice to use her voice to speak up for justice puts her under immense fire. I wouldn't say she navigates it so much as she throws her middle fingers up and walks away from negative comments like a gas station fire in a Michael Bay movie. And isn't that inspirational? She just posts racist shit on her Instagram for months, and then she walks away like she's given us all the middle finger. What a girl boss. Now, if you read through the rest of the profile, it is very glowing. It's all very flattering, all to paint Schumer as like a no-nonsense girl boss who doesn't mind upsetting people. I just wanted to read this as the last point. So Schumer's now at a high point in her career. She's happily turning down work she's not excited by. She has the power to get shows and movies greenlit, and she's fielding offers from top talent like Seinfeld. This is a nice moment. I'm grateful, but the nature of this industry, feeling like you're in a good place, goes away fast. So the whole article is like bizarre in its tone in contrast of what she's saying. You'd think she just angered conservative men for, I don't know, promoting feminism or something, right? It's, you know, people are angry with her for very, very good reason, but it hasn't affected her career at all. Where we've known other people have been fired or haven't got gigs or are now, you know, looked down upon in the industry. And I remember Rowan Blanchard also said that she knows loads of people who are scared of speaking up for Palestine. And that's the climate of fear in Hollywood for people who just want to express their support. Oftentimes just for basic human rights. Oftentimes just for a ceasefire. They just want a ceasefire, right? That is the limit of what they can say about this stuff. I just want this to stop. Can't even get into any of the nuances, and they're still afraid to do that, right? Because they know that could affect their career. They know it could really, really basically end their career. But here comes Amy Schumer, someone who's not like uncancelable. Like, I wouldn't say she's that popular enough, that she couldn't have a controversy that damages her career. But here she goes, ranting, actually putting racist shit on her Instagram, harassing people in DMs about why they would even call this out in the first place, right? And saying that they're anti-Semitic for doing so. Doesn't affect her career. Apparently it's as good as ever. Apparently it's the best moment of her career, only months after saying all this stuff. Because yeah, the American establishment does not see Muslims in general as equal. They don't even see them as human in many cases, and they definitely don't see Palestinians as humans. Look what Biden is doing right now. He basically gave the cops a green light to crush these protesters. He's literally ruining his presidency because he supports Israel so much. And that's the brainwashing of a guy who is an Irish Catholic by American exceptionalism and just how much pro-Zionist propaganda is in the US, right? And then you have people like Amy Schumer who take that to like another level and will just flat out just post racist shit as well. And it's just clear Americans of a certain age and the American elite just have an absolutely insane worldview, very, very racist, and they think basically the US and Israel can do no wrong in terms of geopolitics. And to even point out that Israel have done something wrong to Amy Schumer was anti-Semitic. But again, none of this inflammatory stuff has actually affected her career in any way, and Variety are writing glowing pieces about her basically being a girl boss feminist and talking about how people in New York come up to her and thank her 10 times a day for sticking up for Israel by being very racist and calling anyone who would criticize the Israeli government's actions actually anti-Semitic. And although she's taken a break from posting this shit, obviously most of us are not going to forget this, but Hollywood in general is happy to forget it. And they don't care. A lot of them don't even see anything wrong with what she said. And a lot of people, like Jerry Seinfeld, they either agree with it or they probably have worse views when it comes to this stuff. But anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.